In the heart of Montana, beneath a rocky cliff, a chance discovery in 1968 would fundamentally rewrite our understanding of one of the first populations to inhabit the Americas. A small skeleton buried with deliberate care and reverence, surrounded by ancient implements and covered in red ochre, emerged from the earth. This was no ordinary archaeological find. It was and remains the only known human remains from the Clovis culture, one of the earliest and most iconic prehistoric societies in North America. The remains belong to a boy who lived 12,600 years ago. He is known as Anzic I, and his DNA represents the only genome ever recovered from a Clovis individual and one of the oldest complete human genomes from ancient Americans. For decades, scientists wondered who the Clovis people really were and where they came from. Then they sequenced this child's DNA, and what they discovered proved one controversial theory completely wrong. The Clovis culture, named after the Blackwater Draw near Clovis, New Mexico, where their signature implements were first unearthed in the 1920s and 30s, had long stood as a symbol of humanity's first major foothold in the Americas. Their artifacts are these iconic fluted spear points chipped from stone with exquisite precision. These artifacts date back to between 13,000 and 12,600 years ago, making them the oldest widespread tool assemblages in North America. These weapons were designed to penetrate the thick hides of Ice Age megafauna. Over 10,000 such points have been discovered, scattered across the continent from the Atlantic seaboard to the Pacific coast, often clustered near ancient kill sites where the bones of mammoths and mastodons lie in tangled concentrations. But the Clovis weren't just hunting the massive beasts of the Pleistocene. They were surviving something far more threatening, an extinction event. The end of the Earth. Pleistocene brought the Younger Dryas, a sudden climatic cooling around 12,900 years ago that lasted centuries, plunging temperatures and dooming the great beasts they hunted. As mammoths died out and bison herds dwindled, the Clovis adapted or disappeared. Their tools are what survived from their era. But the actual human remains of the Clovis were extraordinarily rare to find. For decades, archaeologists maintained the Clovis first paradigm, that these were the very first pioneers crossing from Siberia via the Bering Land Bridge around 15,000 years ago, dispersing to populate 2 continents. But contradictions in that narrative were accumulating. Fast forward to 1968 in the ranch lands of Wilsall, Montana. The Anzic family had granted permission for a gravel pit to be excavated near a rocky cliff. What began as routine construction unearthed something extraordinary, fragments of human bones scattered amid a collection of stone tools. 2 construction workers stumbled upon the remains of not one but 2 individuals, named Anzic I and Anzic II after the family, though only Anzic I would prove suitable for analysis, while the second, Anzic II, was too fragmented for meaningful study. The site, now known as Anzik, became the only known Clovis burial in the Americas. The bones, small, fragile, coated in a rusty red pigment known as ochre, were carefully collected along with approximately 125 artifacts. The infant, designated Anzic I, was no older than 18 months when he died. His tiny skeleton was incomplete but sufficient for conducting scientific studies. Radiocarbon dating would establish his burial to 12,600 years ago, precisely at the Clovis era's conclusion. His cause of death remains a mystery, but his people didn't abandon him. They wrapped him in animal hides, dusted him with red ochre, a mineral pigment, and laid him to rest beneath their tools. For decades, the Anzik remains were stored at Texas A&M University, studied sporadically through anthropological and dating techniques. But in the 2010s, a revolution in ancient DNA fueled by next-generation sequencing presented a new opportunity to study these ancient bones. Enter researchers from Texas A&M and Montana State University, collaborating with Sarah Anzick, part of the Anzic family, just a child of 5 during the discovery, who would later become a molecular biologist. They embarked on a quest to sequence Anzic I's complete genetic code. It wasn't straightforward. The bones had endured Montana's brutal freeze-thaw cycles for thousands of years, leaving the DNA fragmented. Authenticity tests proved the DNA was genuinely ancient. Scientists observed clear signs of cytosine deamination, a type of chemical damage that occurs when DNA ages. Through incredible precision and persistence, they finally achieved it. one of the first complete genome sequences of an ancient North American. The results were revolutionary. Anzic 1's mitochondrial DNA, passed from mother to child, belonged to haplogroup D4H3A, a rare lineage common among some Native American groups along the Pacific coast today. But here it was inland in Montana, which challenged assumptions of coastal-only migrations. His Y chromosome, the paternal thread, was QL54, a founding lineage for American males, diverging from its Asian counterparts around 16,900 years ago. Statistical analyses supported this. Using a method called outgroup F3 statistics, a mathematical approach for measuring shared ancestry by comparing how much genetic history two groups share with a distant outgroup, scientists found that Anzic 1 shared substantial genetic drift with 52 Native American populations. But the most profound revelations lay in the full genome, the complete set of 3 billion DNA base pairs. The results showed he is a direct ancestor to many, possibly up to 80% of today's Native Americans, especially those in Central and South America, like the Caridiana of Brazil or Maya descendants. That leaves approximately 20% unlinked through this lineage, hinting at the possibility of another unaccounted population or wave of ancient people, perhaps from those deeper northern divergences or later arrivals. The Anzic genome also revealed an unexpected genetic split among Native American populations that began before the Clovis era. Most Central and South American groups like the Caridiana of Brazil and the Maya share a close genetic link with Anzic 1, while northern populations such as the Cree, Ojibwa, and Algonquin trace to a slightly different lineage. This suggests their ancestors diverged from the Anzic line earlier than 12,600 years ago. The genetic findings also addressed one of archaeology's longest-standing debates, the origins of the Clovis people. For years, two competing theories dominated the discussion. The prevailing interpretation held that the Clovis people descended from Asian populations who crossed the Bering Land Bridge around 15,000 to 14,000 years ago. But a controversial idea known as the Solutrean hypothesis suggested that Clovis ancestors might have originated from southwestern Europe, crossing the Atlantic during the last glacial maximum between 21,000 and 17,000 years ago. By comparing Anzic 1's DNA to modern and ancient populations, researchers found absolutely no evidence supporting the Solutrean hypothesis, as there was no European genetic affinity whatsoever. Instead, the boy's genome showed a clear connection to Siberian populations, particularly a 24,000-year-old individual from Malta in Siberia. This confirmed that the Clovis people descended from Asian ancestors who migrated to the Americas long before the Clovis era began. However, this does not necessarily mean that the first Americans came exclusively through the Bering Land Bridge. Moreover, archaeology has also demonstrated that the Clovis were not the first. Sites such as Monteverde in Chile, dated to around 14,500 years ago, and the human footprints at White Sands, New Mexico, dating between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago, show that people were already present in the Americas long before Clovis culture emerged. So, what became of the Anzic remains? After the DNA results showed connection to Native Americans, the remains were repatriated. In 2014, after the genome was published and additional samples were collected, the Anzic child was reburied, returned to the Montana earth, not far from where he was found. But his significance remains unrivaled. Today, the Clovis Anzic child remains the only individual ever discovered whose genome represents the Clovis culture, providing an unbroken genetic link to the earliest widespread tradition in North America. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into how genetics is rewriting history, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next discovery. This is Hidden Strata,